You took on Apple last year, claiming that they're charging way too much to be part of the App Store. They came back and said you want all the benefits of being a free app without being free. What is the status of your situation with Apple? Have they relaxed any rules or fees for Spotify?
Well, I think first and foremost, this is an ongoing complaint in the European Union at this point. So I can't talk too much about the specifics on this. But obviously, long term, we do expect Apple to open up, and we're very encouraged about being able to now finally use Siri as a way of just building in voice supports and also being available to build products for the Apple TV and Apple Watch, something that we haven't been able to do until very recently. So I think it's moving in the right direction, but we still have many steps to go before we would consider this a an open and fair platform.
Apple has stopped releasing numbers for Apple Music. Do you think that their growth has slowed, perhaps?
I can't really speak to what their numbers are. My guess would be as much as your guess. What we have, though, is, and we've said this publicly before, we're two times the size of our nearest competitor, and we're about three times the engagement than our nearest competitor, too. And we think those two characteristics means we should be growing a lot faster.
I wonder if you're surprised that Apple hasn't innovated more in an industry that it dominated for so long.
Well, here's just my take. I think, we talk a lot about these big tech companies, and we talk a lot about how you could be very good at building these great companies, and they truly are phenomenal companies with amazing businesses. But I think there is something about focus. And this is something that, I've said a long time, that we're unique in the way that we're focusing all of our time and attention on this one opportunity. And it's all about bringing audio onto the internet in a big way and moving it off of linear radio and physical formats. That's what this whole company is focused on. And that means everyone who's passionate about our mission has a sure way of coming here. Like, if you're passionate about music, if you're passionate about audio, Spotify should be the company you want to join.
So let's talk a little bit about the podcast bet. Podcasts are a big bet for you, but this is still a relatively tiny audience. You've bought a number of different podcast companies now. Why do you feel Spotify needs to own podcast companies rather than being a neutral distributor like you are with music?
Well, I think it's a much more nascent marketplace, just in general, than the music industry was. So, to your point, I mean, we're early in that journey, even though podcasts been around for about 20 years. As a business, it's much earlier. It's really in the last sort of five, call it 5 to 10 years, where you've actually seen fully dedicated podcasting companies that have only focused on that with full-time employees. So we're much earlier in that journey, and for us to try to grow this platform, we think it's essential to really drive just the proximity to content creation and distribution much closer. And then I think, just from a strategy perspective, although there will be millions of pieces of podcasts around the world, there will be few that probably are these daily rituals. So for us to be able to build and invest in those properties, we just think it's a much better fit by owning them than perhaps having them just as a third party relationship.
You landed a highly anticipated podcast project with the Obamas. How's it going? When we'll be able to hear it? And what are we
Yeah,
going to hear when we hear it?
Yeah, we're super excited about that one. So likely you'll hear more about how's it going already in the next few weeks, and that's at the point where we can unveil more details. As you can imagine, this is one where we're keeping tight lips on exactly what's going on and how it's happening. But I can tell you that it's looking very good, and we're very excited about it.
There are so many different podcasts, and there are plenty of top podcast companies that you don't own. I know you've earmarked like $500 million for podcast acquisitions. Where might we see you acquire, and what's the appetite for more M&A?
We're pretty pleased with the portfolio that we have, to the extent that we would see something that would fit, that would be different than the ones we've already acquired. We would probably take a look, but it would be very much on an opportunistic basis.
Well, the companies you've bought are known for true crime and sports. What other genres are you interested in?
Pretty much all genres. I mean, when you think about the moments of time, like you talked about Spotify Kids, I really do believe that kids drama content will do incredibly well on the service, and it's also something where, if you think historically, it's just not been a category that's been doing that well on radio. So we think that there's a big opportunity in that space. We see in entertainment being a big category, lifestyle and entertainment being, something where our audience in particular are very, very excited about the things that are coming out there. So there will be lots of categories, but some of them we can also handle through our homegrown Spotify studios as well, which is the studio we built out internally as well.
Would you make some of your most popular podcasts exclusive to Spotify or on Spotify first? Let's say like Bill Simmons' podcast, Reply All, or whatever you think
Yeah.
your serial is.
Yeah, well, we're opportunistic in figuring out what the right strategy is, whether it's windowing or exclusivities, etc. But we've definitely been experimenting a lot with that. Um, I think what you've saw us do in this quarter, for instance, is I think we had about 70 new originals, of which a number of them were actually exclusive to the platform as well. So you should definitely imagine that exclusivities is a big part of our future when it comes to podcasting.
Now, there's also video, and original video on the platform hasn't quite taken off. What kind of experimenting are you doing there to try to make something like that work?
Well, in all honesty, Emily, we experimented a lot with when it came to video a few years ago. Because I think at the time it was less clear how the landscape of video would play out. Are we going to see long form content? Would we see short form content like YouTube, or would we see something in between? And what would that look like? And so we pursued that opportunity, learn a bit. What we really in the end ended up with, though, is realizing that our key strategy is really around owning background moments, around owning really audio. And so it actually, more so than anything else, informed us about the strategy on doubling down on audio. And I'm very happy with that today when you look at a lot of these other media companies that have to invest billions of dollars in order to even be competitive with the likes of Netflix or YouTube.
People love to float the idea of Netflix buying Spotify. Would you ever be interested in selling? Is that just ridiculous?
I'm not interested in selling. No. And the reason why is I just feel like we are in this really unique time where, as I mentioned to you, it's probably a once in a generation opportunity that we have in front of us of this enormous consumer shift that are happening when people are choosing whatever they want to listen to whenever they feel like listening to it. They're growing up with new interests. They're, fascinating for me is like we used to talk about the only thing that will work in media was short form content. But we're finding more and more that people are happy to engage an hour and a half to learn about a subject in depth. We were talking about, we can't have a professor in clinical psychiatry talking about a very complicated subject, but it turns out that people are engaging with that, and that's very exciting to me. And that's very much now the journey that Spotify's on. It's not just about entertaining people; it's about informing and educating them as well. And it's rare to be in a situation like that, and I think that's a huge opportunity both for me, for the company in itself, and I think ultimately it will reward the shareholders to go after that opportunity too.